num, num num, birdie num num.
And we are live, Birdie Num Num and a world where men have nipples and all those little trite things that make you wonder why even get out of bed in the morning. But we have a great reason to get out of bed, and that's AB Live. I don't know about hope, but I know there is providence and I know there is imagination. So welcome everybody to our latest AB Live, episode 59 here in the virtual Alexandria. Glad to see people already going into the chat, and it's going to be a good one. Lots of good discussion about angels from their history to their anthropology. Did I say that right? Through their psychology. And it's always great to have with us Bernie Taylor. Bernie, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. I love the new intro. And in there, you have something like speakers or provocateurs who are accepted and rejected. And I just came off a 12 academic international conference tour in archaeology, canine science, mythology, astronomy, archaeoastronomy, across the board. And one of them was the psychology of religion. And that's where we're going to go today. In all these, I'm going to tell you, in all these presentations, I was accepted and I was rejected.
A heretic. Good man. Where were you traveling? Did you travel a lot?
All virtual. So it had to do with COVID. So all the academic conferences in the last year went virtual. So had I traveled, it would have been Turkey, Bulgaria, Seattle, Australia, London, everywhere. But this year, everywhere and nowhere.
Yeah, indeed. Well, you still got that gnosis out, but that's interesting. I was able to go, as we were talking, I was just in your hometown of Portland about 2 weeks ago, so it was really awesome. I didn't know that the Freemasons were really influential in making Portland what it is, culturally, psychological, and everything. So very cool vibe about your city there, Bernie.
Are you reflecting on the Proud Boys or Antifa?
Yeah, I did get a tour of where they fight. It was rainy, it was Saturday, and I went down to there. I got a tour of where the marches like destroyed part of the federal building or defaced it. So I did get some cool tour of the modern stuff that's going on in Portland. But so it was very cool, beautiful city.
Well, they don't fight in the rain.
No, that's what I was saying. I knew I was saying. Yeah, you can't film for social media if it's raining and you got stuff on your phone. So.
And you remember Occupy Portland about 10 years ago? It went through the whole summer. So there was Occupy Wall Street and there was Occupy Portland. It ended when the rain started late October. I mean, the whole thing just cleared out. It didn't take any statement on the part of the police or the mayor, any movement of people. It was just the rain.
Oh my God, the weather. Well, I guess capitalism wins again. Just change the weather. Ask Thor for a little change in the weather, and you've got it done. Yeah, but it was beautiful, and it was a great experience, and that's indeed. And with us too, we've got Occupy Pleroma himself, Vance the Moondog. Vance, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine. We were chatting with Occult Fan about something else, but I love the subject of angels. I used to go through the search the Bible for all the references to angels to see what they were up to, what forms they took. I love it when they hide as human beings and they knock on your door, that type of thing. That's, one of the sneaky things they do. So ready to hear a lot of stuff. I always like to learn about it.
Well, this program is Angelic Messengers or Mortal Projections.
Well, there you go. That's Mortal Projections, what I was talking about, right?
Well, I didn't know that. What would the Pope say?
Oh.
So back to Miguel, the Pope, what would you say?
The Pope?
The Pope podcast Pope.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he would say, the Pope would say it could be both. I mean, that's what, for example, I find it interesting when Jung was talking about flying saucers. He said they are projections of the unconscious, but he says they have a kinetic ability. They appear on radars, you can see them. So it's almost like our projection is changing reality and making something real and maybe conscious, or making some sort of entity have a matter, if you would. So it could be both, Bernie. Why not?
Well, we're going to go through this program in a little bit, in a few minutes, but in the end, if you can find your peace through angelic messengers or mortal projections, the same thing. So Deng Xiaoping, former premier of China, once said, "It doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mouse."
Yeah, the results. Yeah, the results in your life. That's what matters. How you act and everything else. How you are transforming your psyche is clean and whole and useful. So, good point.
Well, that's what Deng Xiaoping said, not me. You know,
Ah,
I don't
maybe,
think he's still alive.
maybe some UFOs are angels traveling.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna take a ride today that is beyond the believable, and some of the guests are going to say, "Well, what is this freaking true?" And the answer is we can say freaking on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And the answer is that it is freaking true. And so we're going to go places that people just couldn't have imagined prior to this work. Nobody could have imagined. And this is the first time I've done this on a podcast. Before Orion came out about 4 years ago. Unless you read the entire book, you could not have come to this point. And there's stuff I was holding out. And I gave like the final chapter at the last two conferences I did. This on the psychology of religion, and the other one to an archaeology, a worldwide archaeology conference on prehistory. I kind of let out everything that I didn't have before, didn't put out there. And the other one was on sacred mountains. And that's a big subject for it. That's another one that we touched on the last time, but this program, I went back to the Upper Paleolithic and we dove into the sacred mountains. Last time we talked about Mauna Kea in Hawaii. And by the way, they sort of sorted that thing out. And this basic story was that they wanted to build an observatory on top of the mountain, $300 million, but none of the money went to the locals. And that was the local sacred mountain, their place where they went to see the stars. So in the end, it came down to a agreed upon, we need to talk about this, okay, as opposed to protesting and all that sort of stuff. So we had an influence because we came to the conclusion in our last program that people need to sit down, talk about this, and exchange. This isn't science versus superstition. This is about a commonality of belief that we all have that's in our unconscious, whatever you call that unconscious. So kudos, Miguel and Vance.
Great to hear, and great to hear. Yeah, that people can actually work stuff out is amazing in 2021 in these days. And yeah, and Portland has the sacred Mount Tabor that I went up. I guess it's a hill, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of a hill. So it's the sacred Mount Tabor is where Jesus ascended. Actually, Jesus transfigured on Mount Tabor.
Okay.
But we have cosmic mountains here, and there's a story, a native myth, I should say, of Mount St. Adams and Mount Hood that are both volcanic, right? You know, they both threw rocks at each other. They were fighting over a woman, and those rocks ended up in the Columbia River and blocked the Columbia River. It became like a lake such as it is today. There's a story about the coyote ultimately taking care of the rocks. And the woman became Mount St. Helens. And so there's a myth, that's a story of the Native American story. And you can go all around. We have a very rich Native American history because we have Native Americans still here, unlike Chicago, right? I mean, nothing wrong with it, right? But we have, you had some sports team that was Native American, right?
The Blackhawks.
The okay. Yeah. Okay, so we actually have Native Americans who have the traditions that go back since time memorial. And so we have all these things we talk about in Jungian sense, these archetypes, they're all here. And the Native Americans still have them in the culture. And we still name our places after them.
True.
And so we're in a rich place for diving into the unconscious to see who we are, where we come from. But today's program, we're going to go deeper than that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I found it interesting in Portland. You could feel the magic, and I thought it interesting that a lot of the gift shops, Bigfoot is very popular. A lot of Bigfoot merch there. I was like, take
Yeah.
me to him and keep me away from Mount St. Helens while you're at it. But then I kept asking my guide, my friend, well, is there any portals? And because a lot of the topics of the show has been portals that you can find in southern France, Portugal, Bermuda
Sedona.
Triangle. Yeah, exactly. But he told me there is a place in Oregon where there is sort of that portal. In other words, compasses don't work, things go uphill, all the signs that there is some sort of mystic portal. So it's no surprise that that's why Oregon is how it is. There is definitely some magic going on there.
Well, I think it was on NPR. There was a kind of an expose talk, and it might have been it was one of the Sunday morning programs. And this guy did a story expose on Bigfoot watchers, followers.
Mm-hmm.
And he went up to Mount Hood with them, and he camped with them and the whole deal. And he noticed two things, and he also went to a convention. He learned two things. The first thing is that all those people camping up on Mount Hood waiting for Bigfoot to walk along, they're all single. Every one of them. And the second thing he learned at the conferences is that they're all white. They're all Caucasian. And so those are the two commonalities of Bigfoot watchers. For however you take it, that's so we're the nutty ones. Well, we're all attached, right, Vance?
Ultimately, you bet.
Okay, so we don't fall into the Bigfoot nutty camp.
Yeah, those guys are looking for love in all the wrong places.
That's right.
But,
Bigfoot's boring. He never tells you anything interesting. He just kind of like disappears and appears. It's like at least the aliens come and like lecture you about how the Earth's going to get destroyed if you don't, change your act or clean up your act. But Bigfoot doesn't say anything. Doesn't teach you anything.
Well, there's some archetypal reason why there's such an interest. There's something that's striking a chord because Bigfoot, the legend is just as popular today as ever, regardless of science, what they've discovered. It's just enduring.
Well, he's the Enkidu of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Enkidu, the Gilgamesh, and the rest of us. So we've always had the wild man, and we've called him different things. He is the less civilized among us, and among the Native Americans here in the Columbia Basin, they also believe in the Bigfoot. Okay, they have many different ways that they describe the Bigfoot, but ultimately he is the man that's still out in the woods, and it's the same common concept. So he is the beast in all of us, and that's
yeah, because Gilgamesh, what was the name of
Enkidu?
Enkidu, his boyfriend, or whatever. Yeah, he was a wild man when he found him. He probably looked like Bigfoot.
He was created to be Gilgamesh's consort, not a consort, but his first he battled him, which is battle himself, of course, and ultimately they became close friends at the end of the battle, and then they romped around and did their adventures.
And then he dies, and Gilgamesh is sorry and goes on his own adventures. Yeah. So classic.
Yes, the Bigfoot. There's a Bigfoot in all of us.
Awesome.
And it goes back almost 4,000 years.
Makes sense. Bigfoot. Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into your awesome presentation, a little housekeeping, as I call it, for those of you after the presentation who want for questions, please write as many question marks or do it in all caps. If you do the super chats, of course, you will be taken to the top of the spot. Outside of that, for announcements, we've got some very cool October shows, very Halloween themed. We got shows on the Daemon, Santa Muerte, Demonology. We got, speaking of Gilgamesh, we got Micah Dank, who's going to do his astrotheology presentation on the Numa Elish and probably a Gnostic Gospel. We have our Halloween special with Scott Smith and his wife, Sandra. So we got a lot of cool content coming in October. So don't miss it. Other than that, for those of you who are part of the Finding Hermes program, please keep in mind we are the Q&A, the exclusive private Q&A is this Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central. And again, as I always say, if you, I am now doing this full time, doing all this multimedia stuff. So if you need any voiceover work for your book, commercials, documentary, whatever it is, podcasts, I am here for hire. And I've already done a lot of books and more books coming out this year and a lot of other work. So just putting it out as I ask for your support as always. And I do appreciate all of you who support this Red Pill Cafeteria on a weekly basis. So that's really all I got right now for announcements. I got a couple more later down the road. So let's get to the main event with angels. Bernie, you want to get us going?
Absolutely. And there might be a hiccup here for just a few seconds. We're going to pull up the PowerPoint presentation, and we are going to make it so.
Yeah, you got to hit the share screen.
Yeah, and then so you're going to, I believe.
There you go. Let me I'll add it to the stream. Oh, wait. That's not it, is it?
Okay,
why is it only me?
We're going to work this out. This is going to happen.
Wait, hold on. There you go. I got it right.
So right now, I truly believe that you can see the cover screen, but you can't see any notes.
Correct.
We see no notes. We just see this angel pointing down, angelic messengers or mortal projections.
And Bernie Taylor. Here we go. Ready, everybody?
Ready when you are.
The show now begins. How did we first come to connect with the Birdman or angel and integrate them into our belief systems? This is a question that takes us across continents into our earliest images in Upper Paleolithic cave art. Thank you for having me on your channel to present angelic messengers or mortal projections. My name is Bernie Taylor, and my research explores a deep root to mankind's creative capacity by looking at how we came to view our cosmos through the study of Upper Paleolithic cave art. In this presentation, we will journey back in time to the earliest depicted angelic projections from the human imagination to better understand how they came to be. Belief in the angel, or human bird avianoid, as a messenger between humans and the divine is widely found in religious literature, art, and in the anthropological record. Here we find the angel Gabriel in the Abrahamic traditions, who is a messenger to Mary, mother of Jesus, Abraham, Daniel, and Muhammad. The avianoid comes in many forms and is not unique to Abrahamic traditions. The Greek Zeus, god of sky and thunder, who ruled over Mount Olympus, transformed himself into the eagle Agala to swoop down and abduct the beautiful young boy Antinous, who would become his cupbearer. The falcon-headed Horus was an intermediary to the divine for the ancient Egyptians. The giant bird Garuda was a mount of the Hindu god Vishnu. Tengu, with its human and avian characteristics, is found in the Japanese folk religion. In ancient Babylon, an important deity was the winged avianoid Ishtar, and in ancient Assyria, the benevolent genie was winged. In the Siberian Yakut shamanic experience, the practitioner transforms in a sacred horse dance through the aid of a horse and bird. The aim of the dance is usually to travel to another dimension, often the land of the dead, whether above or below, to ask the deceased shaman for assistance in healing or some other need of the clan. In mythological terms, the transformative Yakut shaman might be called a trickster. The tradition of asking the deceased for assistance, whether they be demigods or saints, was widespread in ancient times as well as in practice today. This chronicle of a Yakut shaman's horse dance was documented around 1900 by a Russian ethnographer. We should watch for transformative practices, including through birds and horses, and consider the concept of healing in the arts as we go along. On the American continents and Siberia, animistic peoples adorn the wings of a bird to connect with the great mystery. The wearing of just a single feather to aid in the same connection to the beyond, which goes by so many words, can be found almost worldwide among people who not long ago or presently are hunter-gatherers. This is a global phenomenon that may reach back to our earliest animistic roots, deep in the prehistoric past. There are still some shamanistic and animistic spiritual leaders who transform into a bird and other animal beings. To reach them, we must travel to the ends of the asphalt highways from our secular cities, past the fringes of faith-based agricultural communities with their stone churches and dome mosques. These are peoples, often without a written history, whose breadth of spiritual secrets rarely enter the anthropological record. We can draw what has been learned by anthropologists and then look to the archaeological record for further study. There we may find more about from where the avianoids of animistic, shamanistic, and ancient times to the present originate, and whether these images are truly angelic messengers or mortal projections. Clues may be found with this prehistoric avianoid in the French cave of Lascaux to about 17,000 years ago. He's in the so-called shaft of the dead man. Note that there is no evidence he or anyone else was dead in this shaft. The birdman is surrounded by a bison who appears to be dropping her calf, a spraying rhino, and a bird on a post. The orientation of the bird on the post and the hooves of the rhino establish the lower horizontal plane. The birdman is at the same angle of the heliacal horizon of Orion relative to the horizon. Note that the orientation of the constellations to the horizon changes over time and in different locations. This pictorial astronomical relationship is not likely to be by chance. We may find more clues in other Paleolithic caves. On the Agnus Dei panel in the French Grotte de Père from an earlier period, we find this agitated horse or mare looking over her back. Picasso appears to have borrowed this horse from Grotte de Père. I'm being generous with the word borrowing. The Spanish artist has an interesting twist on this perspective. In his own words, I would rather copy others than repeat myself, and that way I should at least be giving them something new. We can compare and expand in view of the original panel to my outline masked birdman character. The mask is most representative of a griffin vulture. Less obvious are the rump and the forward rear leg of the horse that have the appearance of a plunge diving turn. Know that the birdman merges with the previously pictured horse to become a kind of centaur. The vulture gives him the wings to fly, the turn to plunge dive, and the horse the ability to run fast. They may also gain the use of other sensory traits, such as higher levels of vision, hearing, taste, and smell that may not be as strong in other human animals. This is, of course, a psychological experience. Picasso borrowed this Paleolithic avianoid for his 1936 painting, curtain design for Roman Roulet's play Les Fortunes Juliet. Note the long beak, strong breasts, large fingers, and odd feet on both characters. We might find evidence of the avianoid among earlier art at the Upper Paleolithic cave of El Castillo on the Iberian Peninsula, where on the 10-meter across panel, about 30 feet, called the Gallery of Discs, there are more than 80 red discs that are on average about the size of the palm of your hand. One disc among them has been dated to at least 34,000 years ago. On this panel, we find an archetypal teacher and apprentice. We may also refer to the archetypal teacher as a spiritual leader or trickster, who is the internal guide from the place of the ordinary to that of the extraordinary, such that he may take us today. Note the wide instrument eyes of the apprentice and how the teacher speaks into his ear. He appears to be sharing a captivating story. Maybe he can tell us more about avianoids. Let's listen in. Also listening in on the shoulder of the teacher is a fledgling golden eagle that stands about a foot tall. This is a roughly to mid to late June time period for the young eagle. The artist is designating a time and place. There's also this masked cosmic man avianoid, whose left leg and right arm are raised. The right hand holds what appears to be an egg. His left arm has a feathered texture. We can take a closer look at the mask of the cosmic man. Note that he has one eye on the left side of his face, and the right is the beak of an eagle. One can see the impression of a nose below the mask and what appears to be a mouth and teeth above a dropped chin. This is where we can truly see the many realities of an animist. When we turn our heads 90 degrees sideways, and we're watching you right now, Vance, which may take us out of our chairs, the teacher and the fledgling golden eagle transform into the mask of the cosmic man. See how the artist used the juvenile eagle to form the beak of the cosmic man's mask. The artist is telling us that the bird and the man are separate, but can also become the same. The avianoid is now the divine. The teacher, as trickster, travels with the assistance of the bird to another reality or dimension, which is of the divine. We will learn more about these concepts as we go along. On this panel, we find a speckled mare. She's agitated and appears to be leaping with her head turned as if something is on her back. Our cosmic man may be what has agitated the speckled mare. He merges with her in the same tradition as the birdman horse on the Agnus Dei panel at Grotte Père and the Yakut shaman. Again, the horse gives him strength. The cosmic man is now the hero who has answered the call and is now on his adventure or journey. All the animal beings on this panel merge or interact with the human characters. We encounter another transformation where a mask is put on to become an avianoid. Note that our hero's left hand is feathered and behind his back. This is also the feathered left hand of the cosmic man. They are the same character. The avianoid, or early source of angels, is originally of a man. I fully accept for some scholars and listeners that this may be that aha moment, while for others it may be heresy at best. Yet wherever one stands, questions about from where we come from and how we came to believe what we do face us all. There are many other animal beings on this panel. Some will help us to put the avianoid in context. One is a spinning bottlenose dolphin. Note that the dolphin is depicted above the surf. We have now entered a marine environment. Our hero merges with the dolphin to become a merman and now has the ability to swim and leap out of the water like a dolphin. The dolphin also assists our hero by lifting him into the sky. He reaches the far shore, which is now West North Africa, to be greeted by a monk seal. The artist is describing a journey across land and sea. On that far shore, there's a woman in distress. See her sunken chin and cheeks, sorrowful eyes, and long braided hair accentuated by the red discs. When the damsel in distress archetype is encountered, the story is evoked. The surrounding characters fill in the cast. There's a Spitz's dog with its tail flopped forwards. Present DNA studies indicate that the Spitz is one of the earliest known dogs. Here is an elephant drinking water from a pool and another with a raised trunk, or so it seems. Turn your head sideways again, and you will see that they are the same elephant. The artist formed from the same ear and trunk. Our hero enters and swims in the pool. See his head and arms freestyle swimming. Our strong swimmer's moving head show him coming up for air between strokes. He encounters the elephant in the pool. The artist depicted an aerial view of the elephant in water with her floating ears. We find pictured here an inner conflict. Our hero meets and struggles with himself, where we will soon see is another time and place. Perhaps this is an upper Paleolithic version of the ghost of Christmas past. The hero has external battles as well. He encounters a lion who paws him to the ground. The hero prevails, becoming the apex predator. As a symbol of that great strength, he wears the red spotted pelt. This depicted myth is, of course, connected to that of Hercules, who slays the Nemean lion in a deep cave and takes home the bloody pelt as evidence. We continue on to find a mother bear watching her cubs climb a tree to safety, and a toothy crocodile, which our hero gets mixed up with. We now turn back time to mid-June, some 35,000 years ago, with astronomical software to see these depicted human and animal beings on the gallery disc and in the night sky as constellations. The journey of our hero is mirrored in the night sky. We can recognize many of the constellations in the great ancient Greek astronomical record from Ptolemy. Traveling from north to south at the top of the panel, when turned 90 degrees again, we have the masked cosmic man, who's the constellation Hercules. The eagle that emerges with is Agla. The eagle also emerges with the horse that is Pegasus to give her wings. Remember Pegasus as a constellation. We return to this character again. In that great astronomical expanse we call the sea is the bottlenose dolphin Pisces, which is swimming southward in the scene we can now recognize through astronomy as a night's journey across water in psychological terms. On the southern shores, the monk seal, which the Greeks found to be the monster cetus. I've swum with monk seals and found them to be quite playful. I suppose that if one heard a monk seal in the dark, the being might sound monstrous. In other presentations that can be found on my webpage, beforeorion.com, I guide the viewer through additional human and animal beings on the gallery of discs to explore the origins of other constellations. Many are familiar to us, such as the pictured Spitz dog, which is Canis Major, the red-haired heroes Orion, who we viewed as being lifted out of the water by the dolphin, and confronting himself as Perseus in a different time and place. As well as the lion Leo, Ursa Major is the she-bear, Draco the dragon as represented by the crocodile, among others. What is most important about these animal beings and constellations in this discussion is that the avianoid experience came from a broader spiritual journey across time and space that involved many animal beings, which assisted the hero. Some other animal beings worth noting are the juvenile giraffe, who hides her neck behind her mother's, along with the Barbary ape, which are both native to Africa, and this breaching humpback whale, who carries our hero home in her belly, that is reminiscent of the biblical Jonah and the whale. The succession of characters illustrate that the journey or pilgrimage of the hero on the gallery of discs is from Europe in the north at the top of the panel to West North Africa at the bottom, with this presented orientation, and then he travels back again. We can determine Europe as the region by the pictured horse and other animals that were native to the continent. The Strait of Gibraltar, where the hero swam as a dolphin, encountered the seal, and rode across inside of the whale, are described by these marine animals. Western North Africa is where we found the giraffes and Barbary ape. We can thereby originate the avianoid archetype to at least 35,000 years ago at the Iberian Peninsula or West North Africa. A sacred space in either region could have been the starting point or destination of this prehistoric cosmic pilgrimage. We may find such a sacred space as we journey forwards in this presentation. Let us now travel to Gorham's Cave of Gibraltar to view Gorham's etching, which is contemporaneous with the gallery discs. Miguel needs to help me with that word. Gorham's etching bears a close resemblance to the nearby Mohassen, which is the highest peak on the Iberian Peninsula. Let us take a closer look to compare the horizontal and vertical lines on each. Note the natural irregularity in the mountain that the Gorham's etching artist captured. This section has the look of an agitated horse. This is pareidoia, but at the same time gives us a physical source for Gorham's etching. So the view is upper left on Gorham's etching. There are a teacher wearing a mask and his listening apprentice. The mask of the teacher has the appearance of a kite. We can see the mouth of the teacher below the mask. The scene echoes the spiritual leader on the gallery of discs, who whispers into the ear of the wide-eyed apprentice. Note that we have seen the hero and the teacher transform into different birds at each location. Each species of birds may have designated the clan or region of each spiritual leader. There are artifacts whose details support the idea of the Upper Paleolithic artists becoming avianoids in their ceremonies through the use of actual bird feathers. The remains of bird bones, primarily from the wings of raptors, have been found at Gorham's cave. Many of the Gorham bird bones, have intentional marks which indicate that the feathers were handled and could have been used symbolically, such as with a headdress or clothes. The bones range in age from 23,000 to 52,000 years ago, although 90% of the bones are more recent than 43,000 years ago. Like the gallery of disc teacher, the Gorham etching teacher spiritual leader draws strength from other animal beings. We can see a mother bear with her golden cub extending from his left shoulder and a wolf on his right. They both give him strength on his journey. There are many other characters on this panel. The artist used two of the horizontal lines on Mohassen to create this other agitated horse. This suggests that the agitated horse character was first found as pareidolia in the geological face of Mohassen, then projected into the night sky as the constellation Pegasus. Afterwards, the image was transferred to other cave walls. This observation is consistent with animistic traditions where the animals, geological formations, and the stars are spiritual beings. In the modern sense, we may say they're like gods. The central line forms the waist of our hero, while vertical and horizontal lines outline his running legs. He encounters an ostrich. One can look closely at the ostrich character to see the features of the man. They are slightly in front of him, if you look closely, slightly in front of the ostrich. Our hero emerges with the ostrich to become this odd, monstrous character who is accompanied by a pair of overlapping dogs. The character in his left hand has the appearance of a lion. Perhaps the legs of the ostrich give him the ability to run faster. He then transforms into a centaur-like bird, man, in the traditions of the Agnus Dei panel in the Grotte Pair and the Garibaldis in El Castillo cave, and the animal beings on those panels that give him strength. One might consider this image to be the insane, yet high forms of art, whether expressed in song, dance, or in the paintings and engravings we find throughout the time, are sometimes both a symptom and a remedy for the prevalent state of grief or mental illness. That is, they're the antidote churned up by the mind when trapped in a box of normality. The creation of the art is a healing process. In the anthropological literature on shamanism in Siberia, there's often a long-term shaman's illness that the practitioner has suffered and which drew him or her in this direction. We readily think of Van Gogh, Munch, and Michelangelo as healing artists. Were there upper Paleolithic artists seeking to achieve the same healing experience? They were clearly seeking transformation and at a high level artistry that we still seek to imitate. We find a cosmological connection in our transformed Gorham's cave hero. The bright star Sirius is Canis Major, designated behind both Orion characters. Sirius is an actual star on the flank of the foredog at his rear. The character in his left hand is Sidon, who guides Orion in Greek mythology. In this series of images, we find the underworld, or inner cave, is a reflection of both the terrestrial and stellar realms. They are the cave artist cosmos, and consistent with the shaft of the dead man at the Lascaux cave and the gallery disc in El Castillo cave. They may portray the cosmic entrance point on the path to spiritual or psychological healing. We can recall the Victoria relationship between the Birdman at Lascaux and how he and the constellation Orion were angled to the horizon. Here we have a different orientation in the time and place of the Gorham etching artist. Throughout these images, we have found that the teacher, spiritual leader, and perhaps trickster has guided the initiate and us through the three realms that structure the interwoven fabric of his cosmos. Those are the mortal plane, the underworld, and the celestial realm, which can neither be studied empirically nor consciously experienced, and thus evade the tools of scientific analysis. Such tools of scientific analysis that the Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung, who this audience is familiar with, has long been criticized for not entertaining. Jung had his own avianoid encounters. The avianoid Philemon first came to Jung in a dream in 1913. Later in life, Philemon and Jung often conversed as he walked through his garden. Jung was the teacher, spiritual leader of his time. Through his own psychic healing, Jung surfaced an archetypal avianoid from within that gave him the ability to find wisdom and strength, as did teacher spiritual leaders who visited the upper Paleolithic caves, prophets from the ancient world, and the faiths they left to us, as well as among animists and shamanists from long ago to this day. Was Jung too deep, too close to his own subject matter, then that being himself, or did he walk his own talk? My interpretation is that Philemon was a mortal projection and not a divine angelic messenger, as were evidenced by all of the other avianoids explored in this presentation that Jung was consciously and unconsciously aware of. These mortal projections were retained in Jung's personal unconscious and are held somewhere deep in the well of our collective unconscious from a time when we all considered ourselves to be animal beings. These avianoids continue to be transformative characters that we easily recognize as they speak to our psychological willingness to interact with and draw strength from other animal beings. The transformative avianoid is often integral to the spiritual experience that is at the core of our being and apparently unique to humans. Garudasana, or ego pose in yoga, along with other animal being helpers, and the movements through the cosmos in the practice are barely indistinguishable from the animistic cosmic interactions projected by the cave artists. We still see the remains of a common spiritual psychology in the ceremonies and images around us. These traditions and archetypal characters are the port from which we sailed and the place that is our cultural heritage. Without appreciating the spiritualities hunter-gatherers with ourselves and how their ideas branched to the religions of our time, we are like a ship adrift at sea with empty sails. We're unable to recognize what we truly believe, forever being tossed in the winds and currents of succeeding theologies. Our ability to look back tens of thousands of years and the Upper Paleolithic cave record now connects dots in our psychological understanding of religion, bringing a not yet forgotten spirituality back into the light. Thank you again for giving us this opportunity to present this program on AM Byte channel. More of my work can be found at these sites. The floor is open to discussion, and I'm now going to stop sharing the screen. And that all sounded good.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much.
And now I'm going to move I'm going to move me to, I'm going to turn off my PowerPoint, and then I'm going to boom. I'm going to do a dupe screen. I got real techie in this.
Yeah, no kidding. Where are we going?
I'm going to do a duplicate screen, and so that I can see you now face to face.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, we are back to where we were before. Thank you very much for that, Bernie. A lot to think about. Before, I'm going to let you catch your breath, and then we'll just go with Vance and the audience. And
it's water. It's water.
It's water. It doesn't
right
matter
off the Mount Hood, guys.
Whatever makes you happy. Whatever
right
makes you happy,
Hood.
Bernie. But yeah, I wanted to mention a product, and this is a Gnostic Viagra. Just kidding. It's not. No, if you take it, you won't want to be romantic ever again. You'll just hide in the darkness. You'll go at it during the day and scream at the sun. So it probably wouldn't be a very good product. But now that I have your attention, I did want to mention a book that it's a book that I just read, Holy Wisdom and the Logos of God, from past guest James Brantingham. And I wanted to mention it because this book, again, that I really enjoyed is 5 translations. The Secret Book of John, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Truth by Valentinus, and the Gospel of Mary. And they're really good translations. And this, I think James has it for the paperback, $14.99. And then Kindle is $5.99. And he wanted me to mention that during October, you can get the Kindle version for only 99 cents. And they're very good translations. Excuse me. What I like about James is that he provides some very ecumenical translations. In other words, most scholars kind of present a classical translation, but he gives you a sort of closer to modern Christianity, New Testament kind of a translation without losing the accuracy of the original intent and theology of the Christian Gnostics. So it's something that's more approachable, and I think you will like it. I remember Willis Barnstone, the great Gnostic translator. He's the force behind the Gnostic Bible with Marvin Meyer. He told me that translations should be both literal and literary. In other words, probably like the people of those caves, Bernie, the writers of these gospels wanted to connect with their audiences. They were doing marketing. They wanted to put it out in the most interesting, engaging way. They probably did a lot of these gospels and performance art and plays out on squares, but in their minds, they wanted to connect with their audience. So Willis always said that whatever the translation is, it has to fit the needs of the audience of whatever history you're presenting it. And James does an excellent job presenting, giving us translations that work for our modern audience without losing the story or the theology or the intent of the authors. So definitely highly recommend it. And it's again for the month of October, it's only 99 cents. I will have links to this book, Holy Wisdom and the Logos of God, on this YouTube show notes. I'll have it on the audio show notes, and I'll have it at our website. So get it in the month of October. I really enjoyed it, and I just thought I would mention this very cool book. Again, The Secret Book of John, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Philip, and Gospel of Mary. And it doesn't matter if you already have a lot of translations at home and you've read the Stephen Davis and the April Deconic, or you're new to Gnosticism. These translations will definitely add to your perspective if you're interested in Gnostic philosophy, theology, etc. So I thought I'd mention it, and that's it. And yes, the Viagra, I'll work on that later for another time if you guys are interested. But that's it. But anyway, I want to give it to you, Vance. You have questions, or what does the audience have for Bernie and his excellent presentation?
Yeah, let's see. I'll start with Astro Rocks Foundation, our friend Anon. Are the animals figures of the rock formations and carvings shown in the El Castillo cave commonly accepted in academia, or is this a personal interpretation?
Well, they're accepted now, but before I worked on this, they didn't exist. I've given presentations. Well, commonly accepted academia is not like a real thing. But
No.
Academics argue with each other. But this, I just came off a 12 virtual academic tour. The last one was the UISPP in Morocco. That's as big as it goes. That's the Union International Prehistoric and Proto-Historic Congress.
So they were excited about it, and they said,
yeah,
"Hey,
lots of
that's
people
really
excited."
there.
Yes, lots of people excited. And before that, I did one on to the European Society of Archaeoastronomy, and they were all. And I did one previously that was in Bulgaria and Argentina to the International Astronomical Union. Those are the people that decided Pluto was no longer a planet. So yeah, I've been old. So this is disruptive. Okay, I'm going to put it out there. And if you're not ready to walk into the underworld of disruptive, my work is not the place for you. If you're a believer, I'm not this particular listener, but if an individual is a believer in angels, my work is not the place for you. If you're an individual who believes that the modern citizen began with the ancient Greeks or maybe the Egyptians, my work is not the stuff for you. And so I've pushed back the clock 35,000 years. For everything we thought pretty much came from the ancient Greeks and the Egyptians. And it asks very deep questions, questions that people struggle with. And I understand that. But it goes back to Deng Xiaoping. It doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mouse. But that was a good question. Thank you very much.
All righty. Have you seen, McAwesome Deluxe wants to know, have you seen Pillar 43 of Gobekli Tepe?
Yes, I have. So everybody, Gobekli Tepe dates to about 11,000 years ago. My work goes to 35,000 years ago. Okay. And I have 15 constellations that are the exact same characters and the exact same orders that the ancient Greeks had in Ptolemy. On the Gobekli pillar, maybe there's Sagittarius, maybe there's something else, but there's actually no organization that we can relate to in modern times. So there's nothing on that pillar that lines up with anything. And so people say, well, the scorpion is Scorpius. Well, I look to see a scorpion. Okay, what we're missing. This is what we're missing. So people at Gobekli Tepe 11,000 years ago had an established astronomy. No question about that, because Native Americans have an established astronomy. Some which even connects to same constellations as the Ursa Major. So pre-Beringia migrations. So Native Americans came over 15 to 22,000 years ago. It keeps getting pushed back. A different migration route, different migrations. So we have a movement of astronomical information across Asia, across then Beringia, into the Americas, at least 22,000 years ago, that originally came to either the Iberian Peninsula or West North Africa. So Gobekli Tepe comes on the scene. It's kind of in the middle of time. It's 11,000 years ago. If you were taking a bus from Portland, Oregon, where I am, to Miami, Florida, Gobekli Tepe is like if you picked it up in, Nashville. Okay, the bus left a long way in time and space before it landed in Nashville. So the people at Gobekli Tepe had an astronomy. It has yet been proven at Gobekli Tepe. I believe it's there, but it needs to be a little more digging to find the other pillars to see if there's commonality between them. As it is right now, the only commonality is you've got a fox in one circle and a fox in another, and then you have the pillars, but there's nothing else yet to tell us that these are recognizable constellations. Keep digging, and we find more pillars. Hopefully we'll find replicas of the currently surface pillars, and then we'll find that answer. But from my perspective, it's irrelevant because that's Nashville. And the bus left at least in Portland based on the current 35,000 years ago. And I would argue that it's much older than that.
Okay, you said something, one of the listeners and viewers, I should say, asked too. You said, if we believe in angels, your work isn't for us, or did I mishear that?
Yes, there are people who believe in the spiritual angel. They go to bed at night, they pray, and all that sort of stuff, and they, get Angel Gabriel, thank you for my day, for everything that happened in the world, and Mary is perhaps an angel now or something like that. My work's not for you, because what I'm doing is I am saying that the angel, and I've gone back 35,000 years ago, I found the earliest known roots that we have of angels. We can see the man who transforms with the mask. We can carry this tradition over tens of thousands of years. The ancient Abraham didn't make up the angel. The angel concept existed before him. It existed as Ishtar. It existed among all these people around the world, and in addition among Native Americans who also transformed through an angelic character. They themselves wear a feathered headdress to transform, to connect with the great mystery by so many words. So for someone believes in angels, this isn't for you. However, I'm going to put it to you this way. In those final moments, in your very end, believe in something. It may be Miguel's smiling face. It may be the laughter of your children. And if it's angels, stick with it, because that's your eternity, whether it be forever or just the final seconds that your brain no longer works. So find whatever that is in your end. Maybe you need a God, a great almighty. Maybe you need the smiling faces of loved ones, such as Miguel, with you.
I need Bigfoot in Atlantis. And your work is still for me, Bernie. Even with Bigfoot in Atlantis, your work is still for
Bigfoot
me.
with wings. There you go.
So very good question on Gobekli, on angels, Gobekli Tepe, and on the question of, is it mainstream? You know, we have to realize that all currently mainstream hypotheses and theories were once fringe. They all were. I mean, so that's just how it is. And so there's a process. And what it takes is for anybody who has a disruptive theory, is to go out there and go to these conferences and be accepted and be rejected, and be humble, be non-confrontational. And what actually came out of this conference, one of the an editor of an archaeology journal in Europe asked me to write a paper that I finished yesterday, is going off to the print. And so there's people who, there's been a huge gap in the history of mankind, and there's a lot of speakers out there who have tried to fill that gap, and you know all the names. Okay, we know the names, right? What they had right is that there's a gap. What they didn't have right, or they didn't have all the pieces to the right, is that it goes back to 35,000 years ago at the very least. So it's not Gobekli Tepe, and it's not Atlantis. I'm gonna put the word out there. It's not Atlantis. Okay, I'm gonna put it out there. So okay.
It makes you'll tell me Bigfoot isn't around, Bernie. Then I'll have to cut you off, man.
Well, you know, Bigfoot is serious stuff here in Oregon. During COVID is still on, I guess. But the governor of Oregon wears a Bigfoot mask.
No way.
So
awesome.
we are,
Yeah, don't mess with your tourism.
Don't mess with our Bigfoot. Yeah.
He's the state bird of Oregon.
But these are awesome. These are very important questions. These are questions that are challenging me, but they're also challenging everybody else in the sphere of alternative prehistory as well as mainstream prehistory.
Yeah, I don't know. Personally, I think that there can be a spiritual reality together with the ancients from 35,000 years ago, depicting animal creatures with wings. I mean, the birds have been around since prehistoric times, the dinosaurs, like the pterodactyls and so forth. So I don't see why there can, as above, so below, as the Hermetics say. So maybe you personally, I guess you consider yourself a materialist. Is that right?
Well, I'll put it this.
Just guessing,
Wow,
put it on
that's
you.
actually a good question. I'm not exactly sure what I consider myself. But I believe when we're looking through the eyes of the Paleolithic cave artists, we're looking through the eyes of animists. An animist is a person who believes that everything has a spirit. The animals are our brothers and sisters. When the animist hears the wind, the animist is listening to the voice of the cosmos. When an animist sees a mountain on the horizon, he sees a connection to the stars, to the great beyond. That's animism. And that is the roots of all religion. So then it comes to the spiritual question. So I don't have all the answers, I'm going to tell you right now. And there's a really big question that no one's asked so far. The question is, why do we do it? Why do we still believe in angels? It's not because Abraham said so. It's not because Horus. Why do we live today in this age of science and reason. We go to the theater. Well, we used to go to the theater. Now we stream things, right? And before COVID, but our heroes, our greatest heroes, are the Fishman, Aquaman, the Spider-Man, Batman. We still take that animism. We find that animism within us, and we draw strength to give our greatest heroes that of the animals. In the exact same way, the Upper Paleolithic cave artists do it. And then we go to the theaters, our own caves, or dens in our homes, and now, of course, and we know there is no Batman, but we have that ability to believe that.
What? No Batman?
There's no Batman, but we have the ability to believe that the man can put on a mask to become the Batman. We fully accept the story. We argue about it. We quote the movies. We dress up as Batman. Well, maybe not I don't Batman, but some of us do. But we dress up as his characters. We write about them. We quote them. We internally have this ability to believe. So is there what, as we have for at least 34,000 years ago. And that became the foundations of the Mediterranean faiths. Okay. So why do we do it? Why do we believe? Why did Jung believe it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a question for you there, for Miguel. Why did Jung believe this? Why did Jung did he get taken in by this? Because Jung, full in his Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he talks about Philemon. They walked in the garden. They talked about deep issues. Where does Philemon come from?
His experience, exactly. It's experience. The people experience unusual things sometimes.
Is his experience, or is he surfacing from the collective unconscious, the animism in all of us? He's talking to himself, but he's projecting Philemon from his own psyche. He projects Philemon, an avianoid, an angel by any other word, right? Let's put it out there, because that is the connection to the great beyond in the sky.
As above, so below. Yeah, into the world of archetypes. That's where it is. Outside and inside, projection, kinetic, everything we've been talking about. Yeah, you can't have both the spiritual and the material solution, which, as Bernie says, animism is a perfect answer, because everything's alive, everything has a soul, everything's conscious.
We are animists. We can't escape from animism. We will always be animists. And it's animism that makes, we can, by taking on the strength of these animals, we took our journeys. And we still, smart as an owl, strong as an ox, fast as a cheetah, you name it. We put it out there, and when we say these things, we say them unconsciously. No one actually deeps down thinks that an owl is smart. It's the wisest owl. We don't, but we have that ability, and that ability is what gives us stories, and the stories that we carry on the literature, we carry on the traditions, we carry on these spiritual faiths that we have no other way to carry on. Animism, we are animists.
And our brains are made of stories. The universe is made of stories. So that's how we are human. We couldn't be human unless our brains are always making stories about the world.
Do we have stories, or do the stories have us?
There you go. Jung said sometimes an idea can have you instead of you have an idea. It comes to you from deep within, and that's it. It possesses you. You don't get to control it. So good point.
And back to Vance's big question. What am I? I don't know.
Vance could be a shaved Bigfoot. We just don't know about it.
I don't know.
I ask you not to tell people the truth of Moondog.
I recognize.
Well, I want to save you money on the razors. You've been complaining about your bill.
Oh, yeah, it's true. It's true.
I recognize that unconsciously, I'm an animist, and that is the collective unconscious. I recognize that, and so I don't want to believe that. I mean, it's because I'm a man of science and reason, the modern citizen. But I recognize that I can't escape from that.
Yeah, well, I kind of agree with you on that score, but that doesn't mean that's all we are necessarily. The fact that we are, animists, and we draw upon that collective unconscious, first of all, it doesn't really tell us the nature of the collective unconscious, right? Is the collective unconscious just what we picked up in our lifetimes and dies along with us because it's really totally within our brains? Or is it something, do we have the ability to connect to other minds in the universe? That's the big question.
So there's the personal unconscious is what we pick up as we go along. And that's, perhaps I went to the mall today. I didn't go to the mall, but let's say perhaps I went to the mall and I saw all kinds of stuff in the mall. And a lot of that, went into some deep place in my head. Don't really remember it now, but it's there. That's my personal unconscious. And this is probably stuff that goes back to when I was a child, or things I wanted to repress, when my sister stole my toy or whatever the story is. And now I remember it. Now I do. But so then that becomes the collective unconscious. And what Jung said, or actually, I should say, not exactly what he said, but the concept of what he said is that the collective unconscious is made of archetypes. Mm-hmm. So the archetypes of this cosmic mountain. The cosmic mountain we saw in Mulhausen, where the the hashtag, from which they found the pareidolia of the animals that they then put into the cave wall. So this goes back for a very long period of time. And Jung found that the two most common non-organic characters in dreams was, one, the water of transformation. Second was the sacred mountain. That's what he found. And so you remember this? Remember the song Billy Joel, River of Dreams? Okay.
Yes.
And Brother Billy, he has that song in his head, and he actually he sees songs in color. I don't really understand it, but he sees songs in color. He sees them in color. So he wakes up from his dream, and he doesn't like the song because, as Billy says, I'm not a spiritual man. Goes in the shower, physically tries to wash it off. Doesn't work. And so he goes down and starts writing it down. And he says, ultimately, he says, I can't sing this song because I'm not a spiritual man. So his producer sets this whole thing up. You know, he's up in the front, sort of like the minister type. He's got the African-American background singers, classic 60s soul, right? And beautiful song. And he sings about his fear of crossing the river. Well, the river is crossing to his death. Many years ago, about the same time that song came out, a friend of mine, a mutual friend, of another person, died. He died in his 30s. He was a librarian, had a heart attack. He didn't smoke.
Wow.
Where'd that come from? And my friend said to me, my surviving friend said, he crossed the river to the other side. And I knew what that meant. Not because I knew that you crossed the river Styx and all that sort of. Unconsciously, I knew what it meant. He didn't have to. Guy, 30-something years old. So Billy Joel has this River Dreams song. He's afraid to cross the river because it's too deep. Metaphorically, it's not as far as he wants to go. But he also talks about the mountains of faith. And Billy Joel, years later, does an interview, probably 5 or 6 years later, and it's on YouTube. And somebody asked him, "What's the song about?" He says, "I really don't know what the song's about." Brother Billy talked to a shrink, and any shrink, doesn't have to be Jungian, it's going to tell you exactly what the song's about. Just what I said right here. And so we get Brother Billy in the show, and we'll do a jam, okay? We'll mix things up. So that is our collective unconscious, these archetypes. But the archetype, we saw this presentation, we saw the damsel in distress. When she's encountered the stories evoked and the other characters fill in the cast, we saw the hero fight with the lion and then take home the pelt as evidence and a symbol of his great strength. We saw the man transform with all these animals. These animals. The eagle flies high. In Native American traditions across the continent, people Native Americans would capture or pluck or find the eagle's feather, because it was the eagle is the highest flying bird that potentially takes one to the great mystery. So we have these archetypes, and these archetypes collectively become a collective unconscious. They structure the fabric of our cosmos, our universe, as you're discussing. But does somebody hypothetically, if there was someone on Mars that never connected with humans on this planet, would we be in the same sync? I don't think so. That's sort of like who's the guy out of Europe? He's a physicist, Rupert Sheldrake.
Mm-hmm.
Love him,
Yeah.
Absolutely love him. Did the
Right.
TED Talk, barefooted, right?
He's a biologist, actually.
Oh, he's a biologist. Okay, people, absolutely brilliant. But he's seeking to where the man on Mars, who's never connected to anyone on this planet, can communicate. And he's got some word for it. I can't remember what it is. So that ties into that. But yes, but we do come from the same place. We come from not just the place of other animals, but we come from geographically the same place. At least our traditions come from this place in West North Africa. I mean, Vance and Miguel, when we were in grade school, it was all about southeastern Africa, right? Tied into Leaky and all that sort of stuff. And the oldest Homo sapiens were about 220,000 years ago in that part of the. But 6 years ago, major find in Morocco, a place called Jebel Irhoud. 300,000 years ago, we have the oldest Homo sapiens. Nobody saw it coming. I mean, this is not fringe theory. It's not. It is what it is. Nobody argues about it. Well, we're talking on this journey. The hero that we saw, he travels to Morocco. That's where he goes. So is this story that we're telling right now 35,000 years ago? or is it 300,000 years ago? And that the European component hadn't been mixed in by that time.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time ago. But we, in this presentation, we jumped angels from roughly 5,000 years ago to 35. What's another 300,000? What's another 265,000 years ago?
Drop in
Right?
the bucket. Yeah.
Yeah, just
an
pile it
afternoon
on.
in the park. Yeah. Vance, any other questions?
Yeah, Joseph wanted to know, he says, okay, perhaps they were smoking something in the cave, then painting on the wall what they saw. What do you think about that concept?
Good question. In fact, prior to my work came along, there were many, that's actually a really good question. There are a number of theories about why people came to create cave art. Some hunting magic was one of them, art for art's sake, people doodling. Another one was this general category of shamanism. Okay. And shamanism, shaman comes out of Siberia, out of Siberia. And shamanism is a Siberian tradition. People in South America are not shamans. They are other people. They have other traditions. There's an overlapping of their traditions because they're all animists. That's a very important thing. So what happened was, in around 1900, ethnographers traveled to Siberia, and under the same kind of structure, let's say academic structure, they traveled to Western North America. And they wrote papers, brilliant papers. And everything they didn't understand that related to religion, they put in this big pile called shamanism, this heap, okay? And the so-called shamanism of Siberia, among the Koryak and the Yakuts, and was very different than the shamanism of the people of the Columbia Basin, which they recorded, and the Thompson Indians in British Columbia. But everything in that heap was everything that the so-called shamans or spiritual leaders didn't want to tell them. Things that they did tell them that they couldn't understand because it couldn't be understood. And the third is, heck, we don't even want to hear about this. So they just put it in the pile. So what happened is, in Siberian shamans, they take psilocybin type mushrooms. Okay. And that became around the world. So that became projected by the Western man, that everybody, all shamans around the world, have taken some sort of ethnogenic substances, hallucinogenic drugs. That's what it is. And that doesn't mean that these things don't have value, okay? And that they have very, it's strong medicine. But it doesn't mean that every art around the world, going back to up until the cave art, there was drugs evolved, or hallucinogenic drugs, ethnogenic substances, whatever word people want to use. Now, that doesn't mean that people didn't smoke pot. It didn't mean that people didn't take magic mushrooms. But there's no evidence whatsoever. And I didn't smoke pot. I didn't even take gummy bears. They weren't illegal. I'm sure Vance might have chewed a few when he was in Portland. I didn't take anything when I did this work. Therefore, to do this work does not require that you've taken an ethnogenic substances. And I would argue that the complexity of this work would suggest you couldn't do anything that fuzzied your head, because it doesn't work. The high-level artists, maybe the high-level artists may have some visions with whatever, but the work itself is not done under the influence. The detailed artists, the Andy Warhols of the world, whatever, right?
Can Mattel.
Yeah, I mean, give me a break. But the detailed artists, so the question then became, why are we today not making this high form of art? And so, as opposed to, they must have been doing drugs. Okay. And the answer, I believe there's an answer to this one. And the answer is that their brains were wired differently. So in our modern world, the modern man of science and reason, what is valued among us is recording information, counting, measuring. We're all engineers of some sort, okay? That is a completely different brain wiring than an artist, okay? And so the artist is on a different end of the spectrum. The visual artist is a different end of the spectrum than a mechanical engineer. It is what it is. And in the last at least 2,000 years, we have been genetically moving ourselves towards the non-artist and more towards the engineer. Okay, and also person who can read and write. It falls in that same category, which is a different end of the spectrum than the artist. So I believe 35,000 years ago, there was a greater interest in high levels of art, and people were breeding by any word you want to use, to create super artists. Okay, and if you look today's world, Picasso's father was an artist. His father was an art teacher. He started painting or drawing when he was like 1 year old. He was doing work at the age of 3 that the three of us couldn't imagine us doing. Okay, his father was an artist, was an art teacher. Pele's father was a professional soccer player. He had the genetics, and his father started to teach him at an early age. Okay, and so we find these great athletes, these great artists, and great thinkers. Anybody's ever won a Nobel Prize for physics, their parents, one or both of their parents, were physicists or high-level mathematicians. These are in our genetics. And so I believe that we had a different focus on genetics 35,000 years ago. And yes, there are hunters, and yes, there are fishermen, yes, there are basket weavers, but there was a focus on people who could read the night sky. Because if you couldn't read the night sky, you couldn't travel across Iberian Peninsula into Africa and back again. No. You couldn't see the pareidolia in the mountains. These are all elements that we have washed away from our genetic pool for the most part. We still have the Spielbergs of the world, right, who have these components. But for the most part, we've migrated toward the engineer, the scientist, and the writer, the technical writer. And if you come to Portland, you can chew on gummy bears.
Yay!
It's legal. It's legal. It's it's not a big thing. It's like people in whoever in North Carolina. I need to get a hit, and nobody let me do it. And you come to Oregon, there's no lines at the
No, everybody was fine. Well,
it's not like a thing.
Everybody was cool. Yeah.
It's not even a thing.
No.
Yeah.
Even here in Illinois, they legalize recreational marijuana, and nothing changed. There was no people lying around drawing birdmen in the wall.
Everybody's
people.
on the.
Sorry, I gotta be politically correct and Rick and Morty. Bird people.
Bird person.
Oh yeah, bird person. I forgot.
We've been talking about bird person in the chat.
Of course.
But here is something to think about. Here's another perspective of this whole thing. When the Native American dancer, the powwow dancer, for example, typically the male dancer is a prairie chicken. Okay, it's a land bird, and through his dance, he has a spiritual transformation to become the bird. The one who wins the powwow is the one who becomes the bird, not the one who has the best feathers. Okay? That's how it works. Who transforms the most accurately, who becomes the bird. And so that's a transformative experience. When people 35,000 years ago were making this cave art and they were making the Birdman, they had that same transformative experience. They were projecting their psyche onto the cave wall to become the bird. Right, and then that bird is Aguilar, the constellation. Mm-hmm. The transformation through the cave wall is also a transformation into the sky world. Mm-hmm. It's into the sky world. Through connecting through the terrestrial, we have the underworld, which is the cave. We have the terrestrial world, which is where birds flew, the eagles flew. Then we have the sky world, where we had the constellation Aguilar. And so the cave artist, through the ritual of creating this art, is connecting himself to the three worlds. In the same way as the Native American dancer is doing in the powwow with the prairie chicken, and some do it as eagles as well. So it's the ritual, this animistic ritual, is that connection, that spiritual connection that we create I would argue psychologically, that we can't escape from. And then we come along. We're the viewers. We're not making the art. And so we come along as the viewers, and we whether it's the viewer of the powwow or the viewer of this Paleolithic cave art, and we're viewing the connection this individual has spiritually owned, become one with, and connected the three realms: the sky world, the Trickster world, and the underworld that is the cave. And when they say, when people say "as above, so below," if you're standing on terra firma, above is the sky and below is the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
We on terra firma are not the below. That's like astrologers say that sort of stuff. But the fact it's the above and below is there's three. That's three. If you can't have above and below if you're at the below. It just doesn't work that way. And so the cave artists, when they went to the cave, they entered the below to create their art. When the apprentices came in, they experienced the below, the underworld.
Yeah, it's also the womb of creation too.
It is the womb of creation, yes. And the world tree is the roots to the underworld, the base at the Trickster world, and that reaches to the sky world.
Awesome.
Can we get
That was
Nate's
a big
question?
answer.
Yeah. If there are any more questions, let's make the audience happy.
Nate wanted to know, how does the cave art relate to the notion of embodying energies and God forms?
Good question. So this is a very important question. So in this presentation, we actually met a few gods. We met Orion, right? We met Orion.
Yeah.
We met Hercules, the demigod. We met Perseus, the demigod as well. So we met the gods. We saw them, their origin on the cave walls. And we saw them as different characters, but actually the same character. It's the same hero on his journey. And the reason they look differently is because the constellations are shaped differently.
Mm-hmm.
So Antinius is the apprentice, okay, and then we have Orion is the red-haired man. Perseus is a strong swimmer. Hercules is the cosmic man. As we take this hero's journey or adventure, and Joseph Campbell said adventure, as we take this journey adventure, we travel through the night sky and we change along that journey. And so we have met the Greek gods. And we've met the Greek demigods on this journey. And so that is the upper Paleolithic times, there were no gods. There was no one god, at least. Everything was a god. Because everything, so you and I would have been gods. The squirrel that ran up the tree is a god. We're all spiritual beings. The mountain is a god. We're all spiritual beings. And then as we came along through time, we start sorting out and said, maybe the squirrel isn't the god, okay? The ancient Egyptians had the morphing of the two. If you look at the Aeneid, the 8, they morphed the man and the animal, okay? So the Egyptians were that transition period. And then so we moved away from the squirrel god and the ostrich god and the birdman god and all this sort of stuff, the eagle god. And then Abraham said, there's one God. But you know how Abraham came to the concept of one God? Does anybody know? Okay, here it goes. Ready? It's in Josephus. Josephus was a Jewish historian, wrote about a lot of things, talk about people's laundry lists, that sort of stuff. And he lived about the time of the historical Jesus Christ. And he said, Josephus wrote in the History of the Jews that Abraham looked at the night sky and he saw that the sun, the moon, and the stars had the same rhythm. We're in rhythm with the animals around him. Okay. And so, the geese fly south in the summer, actually fly south from winter to the summer, and actually fly north in the summer. And the fish migrate up the rivers at certain times of the year. And they were using solar, lunar, and stellar calendars to do this. This is not astrology, because that's how that was their clocks. They didn't, have what we do today. And so Abraham said, this all happens for the benefit of man. The moon doesn't influence the migration of the birds for its own benefit, because the moon doesn't eat the birds.
Right.
Okay. And the sun and the stars don't either. Okay. So he said there must be one God that's orchestrating all this for us. And that's where the one God comes from. And that comes from Josephus and the Legend of the Jews. And that's something you're never going to hear in Sunday Bible study, because it calls on this concept of astrotheology, and the moon, and the witches and all that sort of stuff. But very good question. So that is sort of a transition in time of how the gods were, everybody is a god, and how we came to have fewer gods. And in some religions, especially in let's call the India, Greater India, they have many gods, and most of those gods are animals. So they haven't fully transitioned to the one God, and they have prophets who historically have spoken to those or interacted with those gods. And when you do yoga, as I described, you literally become the upper pillar, the cave artist. When you do Garudasana, the pose, when you do dog pose, when you do the sun and the moon pose, and at the end, you do Shavasana. Shavasana is when you effectively go to the land of the dead. You've ended at the land of the dead. You've died. That is Shavasana. And at the end of Shavasana, you have the corpse. We call it the corpse pose. And then you arise from the corpse pose as a new person. So you've gone through this hero's journey. You've traveled with the animals. You've traveled among the sun and the moon, and you've gone through the lives of people in the past, the warrior, and all this sort of stuff. The yogi is the upper pillar, the cave artist, who through the art of the yoga itself is projecting the same ritual. Don't tell your mom that. Well, maybe you guys have moms doing yoga.
Or your priest.
Yeah, don't tell your priest yet.
But that's really awesome.
It is. It is so animistic that it's mind-boggling. And it's the same animals.
Very cool. Any other questions, Vince? I have my own burning question, but
we had one more. The first question that came up was, is Gabriel Hermes? This is before Bernie, laid out his presentation. So the connection between Gabriel and Hermes, or I could extend it and say, are there correspondences? You just pointed out Perseus and Hercules and so forth.
Good question. I don't have the answer. And I don't have the answer because I'm not I haven't read the green books and the Emerald Tablets. I mean, I don't know. I don't. So, I can't say. One way or the other.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm back in Portland, okay, and Gobekli Tepe is Nashville. Hermes on the way to Miami is Orlando, right? So I'm just back so far in time in Portland that I'm.
Well, speaking of Hermes, that's a question I had. In your presentation, you talked about the trickster, and this one's fascinating. Maybe you give us your thoughts, because obviously these archetypes, I mean, you can say, the wings in the mountain represent the spiritual world, the freedom, the mother archetype, the father. All these figures are pretty set in stone, but the trickster, there's a lot of ambiguity, whether it's 30,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. This being that's he's also a psychopomp. He's a messenger. He's a carrier of souls. He's a helper. He's a destroyer. He's multidimensional. How did the ancients see, or what are your thoughts on the trickster? And I could say, well, this is really unique, but obviously the trickster is alive in nature, because I have a raccoon that I feed, and I know what a trick. I know the trickster. And some nights over here where I live, 200 feet away, I see coyotes. And they are the biggest tricksters in the world. A pack of coyotes will fool you into things. They're pretty wily animals. But
watch your dogs around them.
Oh, well, my dogs are bigger than them. It's my cats that I'm worried about. But tell us about the trickster.
Good question. Now, you use the word ancient, okay? So on out from Portland going to Miami, the ancient world is whatever the heck is in northern Florida, okay? Whereas the Emerald tablets are in Orlando. Okay. So the question is, maybe otherwise phrased as the upper Paleolithic world, the caveman, the Ice Age man. On this journey, we found this in the El Castillo cave. We saw the teacher and the apprentice, and on the shoulder of the teacher was an eagle, a juvenile eagle, stands about a foot tall. And then we turned our head 90 degrees. We saw that the teacher, when you turned it, became the cosmic man. One eye on one side of the face, and then the head of that eagle with its beak became an actual beak coming off the head of the mask. Okay, so that is an element of the trickster. You looked at that image, and well, the first time you looked at it, not today, right? But the first time you looked, you said, "Oh, that's really cool. The guy's got a man with a eagle on his shoulder." And then when we rotated, like, whoa, there, okay, I wasn't expecting that. Okay, you saw the elephant with its trunk out, and then you saw the flip that way. There's actually 4 elephants in that. I showed 3 of them today. And so the trickster in this case is the spiritual leader who is animistic, who's playing with our brains. He's telling us that there are many realities. One reality is of the man with the eagle on his shoulder. Another one is that that reality can shift. When he becomes the avianoid, the bird man, we find the beak off the side of his face, that the two can become one through the act of the trickster in his transformation. So it's magic. And you look at these images, you can always see the chin of the man. You can either see the man before he put on the mask, or you can see the chin under the mask. Okay. The upper Paleolithic artists always do that. So they're saying to us is that it's not a bird man. It didn't start as a bird man. It started as a man that transformed into the bird, and that you still see the basic elements of the man under there. And that is our trickster. And he plays with our heads. So I do these presentations to a lot of academic audiences. That's where I started. My first podcast didn't want me on. Like, who is this guy, right? And I'm going to start off speaking at universities and astronomy audiences. And they're like, I'm going through this. They're like, wow, they're looking. They're kind of like really get, and they're saying, can this be possible? Could this absolutely be possible? Or is Bernie some sort of closet Picasso? And if anybody wants to come to that conclusion, I'll take it. Okay. But you've got to put all my stuff in the Museum of Modern Art then. You just can't say this guy's closet Picasso. But the fact is, I'm not. Okay. I've never been anything really generate any art since I was like in high school or something. It was a shoe. I still have a picture of it. But yes, the trickster is transformative, and we see him travel between the underworld, the terrestrial world, and the cosmic realm throughout this whole presentation. And we can't do that without the trickster, without becoming part of his personal unconscious, looking through his own eyes, such that I hope that I could bring you to today.
Yeah, and that makes sense. The trickster, I know. Yeah, the Native American Lord of the Coyote really represents change. Yes. Man resists change, but change is coming. So let him help you with the change, or be left behind.
Yeah, good questions. Awesome questions. And I've had some of these questions before, not by your audience, but I've been on the podcast and I've been asked the Gobekli Tepe one. I've been asked the hallucinogenic drug one. I've been asked. So these are like burning questions. It's not because they're looking at my presentation, because they've heard other perspectives before, and they're saying, "Well, what do you think about it?" And I'm not going to mention names. We know who they are, and they're asking, "Well, you're not just debating mainstream. You're debating everybody we've been hearing for the last 20 years." And I'm going to put it this way: is that mainstream astronomers and archaeologists and other people off the mainstream have long recognized that there's been a big hole in the story of mankind. It's not a set timeline. No one has ever thought it was. People just couldn't figure out how the pieces fit together. So this is what happened.
That's why you bring in aliens, right?
That's why you bring in aliens.
Yeah,
and
we're done.
So what happened is that the Babylonian constellations, a bunch of them overlap with the Greek ones, But most of these Greek constellations, up with the constellations I showed you today, were not in the earlier Mesopotamian inventory. So what happened is that the ancient Greeks had it themselves, or had an intermediary that went to the caves, and they resourced the constellations. So, and when they went back to these caves, they walked away with different stories.
Mm-hmm.
So the Odin is the cosmic man, is with one eye, is obviously Odin. Okay, he's holding the egg, which makes him the Cyclops. Okay, all these characters were found.
Oh wait, can I stop you as we get to
Sure.
the end? Real quick, the cosmic man. Who is the cosmic? Is this
So
like the Adam Cadman?
He's the Hercules character. The Hercules character. He holds an egg. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so he has one eye. He becomes the Cyclops. But the egg was found as Hercules, who travels to Mount Atlas, and he steals the egg, or the golden apple, from the crocodile, which is Laden. The constant is a crocodile, which is Draco, which is the Latin, which is the serpent on top of the mountain, or the dragon on top of the mountain. So people looked at these images, and they walked away with their own stories. They recognized, that's a serpent, that's a dragon, that's a monster. She's the damsel in distress. But they walked away with different stories, as it were. So Perseus and Orion and Hercules became different characters, different heroes. But in the original story, it's the same hero on his journey or adventure.
Indeed, very cool. All right, well, we are getting the end. Any last question from you or the audience, Vance? Let's one more, because I know Bernie probably has a fight club with Antifa and the Proud Boys.
That's right. Yeah. They're waiting for me downtown.
Go.
No, it's raining today a little bit, so there's
so you'll be
it's
fine.
it's called off. Yeah.
Yeah. Esoteric Fairy Tales says, how do you connect birds and snakes like Quetzalcoatl? Both are tricksters, but how would you distinguish them symbolically and in the hero's journey?
Yeah, look at Abraxas, head of an eagle, legs of a snake. It's from what I've heard, and of course Bernie probably has more. That's where heaven and the underworld meet. That's that place. We humans are where we're the place where heaven and earth meet, where the fallen angel and the rising ape meet. But that's my take. But go ahead.
That's
Bernie.
good. Now I'm going to give you that is a perspective, and that's a valid perspective. I'm going to give you another perspective and kind of a different way to look at this. We saw this Hercules character, the cosmic man, who, if you go back and look at him, you can go to my page, beforeorion.com, you can see the pictures. Okay. All the animals are within his form. All the animals are within his form. Now, almost all the animals that he actually assisted by, I should say. So there's a lynx in there, there's a dolphin, there's and the giraffes. He's assisted by all these animals. They're all actually within his form. All of those animals, except for the lion, are female. Okay, interesting, right? It's almost another conversation. They're all, so he takes on the strength of all these animals on his journey. They become part of him. All these female animals. So is he the cosmic man, or is he the cosmic? Is it Aphrodite? He's not man, or at that point he is not man or woman. He is the integrated self of both the anima and animus. Did I get that right?
Right, yeah.
So that's who he becomes. So this trickster character is the integration of all the female animals. He fights with the lion, and that's probably a good segue to another episode in a different time and place in a faraway galaxy. But I'm good. Exactly. Anytime, people. Yeah, let's do it again.
No, definitely. It's always great when you come. So your website is beforeorion.com.
Beforeorion.com, and that links you to the cosmos. I'm on Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr, Facebook.
You're not very active on Twitter.
No, not too well. I'm across the I'm across the board. And Academia EDU, I have lots of material there as well. If you're an academician. Hey, Vance, awesome. That was really awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You
Vance,
handled,
thanks for everything, Vance. And
yeah.
great comments from the
My
audience.
pleasure.
Everybody in the chat
Yep.
room, you guys rock. Vance, you rock. And yeah, this is the end. Always glad to have you, Bernie. And we will have the audio version out tomorrow. We will have, this will be live on YouTube right after this. And as I mentioned, great shows. Next week, we've got Rose Cat Nelligan, a rising star in the occult, talking about how to encounter your personal daemon or diamond, and great shows. So thank you very much, Bernie, for coming to the virtual Alexandria to Aeon Byte as always. Really enjoy your company and your work in general.
Yeah, thanks, Bernie. It was very interesting.
Love it, guys. Let's do it again.
Let's do it. All right, everybody. Good night. As I always say, thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself here in the desert of the real. Good night, everybody, and thanks for coming to AV Live.
Good night.